All right. On today's episode, we interviewed Marc Andre and talked about something a little bit more near and dear to my heart, right? Which is really online websites and businesses and really how you can get them started and how you can generate some revenue. So, on this one, we talked through a bunch of different things, including some of the kind of pitfalls, some of the ways to look at it, and ultimately where that market is now. So, Casey, what were some of your big takeaways?
Man, I'll tell you, an attractive thing for any entrepreneur is the idea that you don't have to have employees. You can generate income from home. You can be there anywhere in the world. You know what? These things take a lot of time and energy and expertise to understand what you're doing. And I think Mark really hammered in on some of the key things for people to know about this space right now, because there's a lot of changes happening with Google websites, SEO, AI, and how you use it. So, anyways, it's pretty powerful. But I'll tell you, my biggest takeaway from Mark was, he likes to focus on one thing, maybe two, and do it really, really well. Not letting any distractions get in the way. And if he's done with it, if he's bored, he moves on. And that's not a bad way to live.
No, it's an interesting way, right? There's not that drive to continue to grow bigger necessarily, right? He's comfortable. And it really shows behind the curtain, right? Like Casey, you're mentioning, online businesses is kind of that sexiness right now, right? It's that allure of money, but while I'm sleeping kind of thing. And there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? It doesn't just generate money by itself. There's a lot of, kind of what's the word? Kind of bait and tackling of getting a business going, tracking it, and figure out how to turn it profitable. And so we kind of dive into some of that here with Mark, and he kind of tells you that's exactly why he's focusing on just one and a half, right? Kind of has his main one and his side hustle, just because of the energy it takes and some of the things to think about. So,
but I'm gonna go check out Flip My Site because I think it's got incredible information about online businesses. So it's gonna be pretty interesting.
Awesome. So let's hop right into it. All right. On today's episode, we have Marc Andre. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mark, great to have you.
All right. So we're going to talk about something a little bit more near and dear to my heart, right? And kind of where I got started as an entrepreneur, which is really web development and selling online businesses. And so, Marc, you want to give people maybe the 1,000-foot view of kind of what you're doing today and how you got there?
Yeah. So basically, I work mostly independently. I don't have any employees. It's just a small business I run myself. I do use freelancers at times, but I grow small online businesses with the intent of selling them at some point. I typically will work on a project for a few years before selling it. I have acquired a few websites in the past, but it's mostly stuff I started from scratch. I've done a lot of content-based websites like blogs, niche sites, and then a little bit with e-commerce. And so yeah, basically just look to build up an asset to get it to the point where I can sell it and move on to something else.
Got it. So surely your focus is just growth and driving that revenue and figuring the multiple to make the exit, right? It's not about, hey, I'm going to hold this for 20 years kind of place.
No, yeah, I've typically held for like 2 to 5 years. And so I like to work on something for a while. And then like personally, I kind of get bored with working on the same project for a long time. So usually, after I start to kind of get tired of it and ready to do something else, then I'll look to move on. And that's usually a few years.
That's pretty great because I looked at a one of those Amazon businesses where somebody was where their group ran it. One of those managed, did not work out. Would never do it again. Right? Totally was not a good investment. But the appeal of having an online business, right? That you're able to do some basic things to manage. So what type of businesses are you looking at? Like, what are your products, or is it mostly content based?
Mostly content based. I have each website, each business I've had has been a little bit different. I've done a lot with content where it's monetized with ads and affiliate programs. So basically promoting other people's products in exchange for a commission. I've done a good bit with digital products. So as an example, my first website the topic of the site was web design. And so I monetized it initially with ads. And then I also went into selling digital products. So I sold things like Photoshop templates, icon sets, other graphics that people would use in their design. And then I later had photography websites where I sold things like Lightroom presets and Photoshop actions, or basically like for photo editing. So definitely some with digital products as well. But yeah, each site is a little bit different depending on the target audience and what opportunities there might be there for selling products.
Yeah. So I guess tell me a little bit more about that. So were you doing the research on the niche and then you went out and found an existing website to source into that so then you could start to grow it? Or were you doing the research into a specific niche to find one that doesn't have competitors and starting one from scratch? Or did you just kind of stumble into what you found and then try to build something from there?
Yeah, initially it was just stumbling into it. So I mentioned that my first one was on web design, and that was basically I started with completely different intentions than what I wound up doing. I had a full-time job as an auditor for a finance company at the time, and I was just looking to make a little bit of extra money on the side. And I had done some web design. I took a course on HTML in college, and I could, by the end of the course, create a really basic, very basic website. And so I was kind of studying on my own, and I was doing some websites for family and friends, and I wanted to do a little bit more to make some extra money. And so I put up a little portfolio website to try to attract some clients. And to get traffic to the site, I set up a blog, and the blog wound up really taking off, and I was getting a lot of traffic, and I liked working on the blog more than I liked working for the clients. I didn't get a lot of clients, but I did get some clients through it. And but I decided to kind of focus on the blog instead. And so that's when I started to monetize it in other ways, like putting ads on the site and affiliate programs and stuff. And so then digital products, really how that came about was the downside of monetizing a content site with ads is you're constantly chasing traffic. Like if your traffic drops, your income is going to drop. So there's this constant pressure to at least keep up, if not grow. And so it's just like a never ending grind, basically. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I saw, other sites selling products. I had bought some of these products before, so I knew, there was a demand for it. And so I created some on my own. I outsourced some of the work to freelancers to create some products. And that really changed the complexion of the business in terms like I wasn't necessarily tied to the traffic anymore. Like if my traffic dropped and I needed to make money, I could run a sale. I could email my email list. I could find affiliates to promote it for me. And so that's kind of how the development into creating and selling products came about.
And were those for, I guess, niches that you already had, right? And I guess I'm trying to understand for listeners, is it you're creating sites from scratch or finding something and then evolving it from there?
Creating sites from scratch. In that case, I had the audience already coming to a web design blog. And so I created products that would appeal to that existing audience that I already had. And then later on, when I went into the photography websites, it was just photography was a hobby of mine. And so I said, yeah, these types of products have worked well for designers. I wonder if I can create something similar, but for photographers instead. And so I kind of built a site around those products and started it from scratch there.
So it says, was just read a little here on your bio that we just kind of went through. So in 2013, right? So it sounded like that's when this adventure started for you in creating, right? And it sounds like you sold your company for a pretty good amount of money. So talk to us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so it actually started in 2007. That was when I started my web design blog. And then I sold that blog in 2013. So that was my first. I had sold another site earlier. Actually, I sold a couple of sites earlier, but they were like just small projects, nothing significant. I wound up selling the web design blog for $500,000 in 2013. So it was about 6 years old at the time.
So when you went through the sale of that, I mean, so what does a business, an online business, if you sell for $500,000, what kind of revenue is it generating?
At the time, it was generating around $25,000 a month in revenue. My profit was about in the low 20s, and that was about the going multiple at the time. I think I got about 2 years worth of profit when I sold it. Multiples have increased since then, although they've dropped a bit in the last year or so. They were much higher for probably in like 2021.
Did you even know what multiples were at the time? I mean, did you kind of, right? Or did you, again, did you stumble your way through just that transaction, right? Like, did someone approach you, or were you actively looking to sell? And how much did you understand on kind of the business valuation side of things?
I knew I was fairly aware of things from from hearing other people selling and seeing other sites that sold. I had sold a smaller site before on Flippa, and so I was fairly familiar with that stuff. I did talk to a broker about listing it, and he gave me his valuation. It was actually slightly lower than what I got for it on my own, but I was intentionally looking to sell, and I did. I reached out to people in my network, people who owned similar sites, and wound up getting a sale or finding a buyer through my network.
And you feel like they were happy with that acquisition and a post acquisition? Have they been able to grow it?
They did so it did really well for the first year. And then after a year, there was a pretty significant Google algorithm update that took away a good chunk of the traffic. And I know it declined a bit after that. But I think it was still a decent business for them for probably 5-6 years.
Oh, nice.
Fairly well. And then they kind of lost interest in it. And I actually bought it back in, what year was that? 2021, and sold it again in 2023. So I bought it back for a fraction of what I sold it for, and then sold it for a little more again.
So how many of these projects are you able to maintain it now that you've kind of got this craft of building? Are you keeping 2 or 3 deals going? Are you keeping 10 going? I mean, what's typically your bandwidth on your projects?
I usually have maybe like 2 different websites that I'm working on at any given time. What I like to do is to have one that is fairly well established and making the bulk of my income and doesn't require, 100% of my time or effort. And then I have something else that I'm working on the side. So that when I sell the main one, I'll have something else already started that I don't have to start from scratch. I struggle to manage too many different things at once. I'm just personally not great at, managing 5 different websites and not having a lot of time or attention for any of them. So I don't have a ton of different projects, and I also do a lot of the work myself.
Right.
So
no employees, right? So this is all your effort.
yeah. So I typically have 2, maybe 3 at the most different things going on at one time, but usually there's one priority.
Well, but have you given thought to, essentially accelerating that front end just by buying an existing one that you then, because presumably, right, how to monetize these better than a lot of existing people.
Yep.
Right. And so have you looked at cutting out kind of because I know exactly what it looks like to start from scratch for a website and build up all the content, the SEO and the domain rating and all of the stuff that it takes to start to gain some momentum, right? Versus let somebody else deal with that and you instead buy something that is already has traffic that's kind of under monetized, underutilized, and accelerate that piece of it.
Yeah, I have purchased a couple of sites in the past.
Cool.
And really, I guess I purchased 3. One was pretty small, and I wound up just not really doing much with it. I still have it. The other 2 that I purchased, I wound up selling for a profit later. But like you said, they were under monetized. They weren't really the owners weren't really doing a whole lot with them, and so it was a pretty good project for me. The things that I would be open to buying another site in the future, and I probably will at some point. Right now, I mostly work on content sites, and the industry for content sites has been very turbulent in the last year because of Google algorithm updates. A lot of websites have lost a ton of traffic, and so I'm kind of hesitant to right now invest any significant amount of money into something that is fairly risky. And also, I do enjoy starting from scratch. So for now, I'm not really looking to buy, but for the reasons you mentioned, it does make sense, and it is something I would consider in the future.
So what are you seeing on the horizon? So you are seeing, Google's making their updates. Everything, a lot of things are shifting to video.
And mobile, who's the bigger one.
Yeah,
right?
and mobile, right?
That's the one that scares me the most of the web space as a whole.
So I imagine on your website, flipmysite.com, you probably talk about and have content of what's changing with AI, and how do you see the next 2 to 5 years in the space that you're dealing with? What are the changes? What are you seeing on the horizon?
Right now, with so many people losing traffic from Google, everyone's like looking for another platform or another source of traffic. So obviously, a lot of people are moving more towards social media. Facebook is kind of more popular right now for traffic than it was the last few years. Pinterest is a big one. Email, one of the things that I see as being the biggest opportunities or biggest shifts is email marketing. I guess it's not really a shift. It's always been important, but I think now that you can't rely on Google as much for traffic, it makes sense to prioritize building an email list that you can market to at any time. So I think, getting away from just relying on a site where you're getting 80-90% of your traffic from organic search and then just monetizing it with ads, that's about as risky as it can get, because you've got really just one main source of traffic and one main source of revenue. So anything where you're mixing that up and getting 2 or 3 different sources of traffic at least, and making money in a few different ways. But I see an email list as being really valuable, regardless of whether you're promoting affiliate products, selling your own products, offering a service. You can use an email list for just about anything you want.
So for our listeners out there that are saying, okay, because there are a tremendous amount of entrepreneurs out there that are attracted to online businesses. I mean, we just had our conference, And I would say there was a very good handful that were like, hey, I'm looking to buy an online business. This is why. And I think it's the attraction of not having to have a staff or having people or a lot of those things. You can always, maybe use a third party VA and those kind of and those pieces. So how would one person, let's just say it's listening, how would they go about building an email list in today's? How would what's kind of the blocking and tackling of
And the biggest mistakes people do trying to build it?
I'm building that list.
Well, my approach, like I said before, my sites are usually content based. And so my main way of generating or building an email list is through content. So in order to get people on the site, or in order to get people to subscribe, I have to get them on the site first to get them to see, a sign up form or a pop up or whatever it is that's collecting that email address. And typically I'll use a free resource or what's referred to as a lead magnet. So you give somebody something in exchange for their email address. So it might be like a checklist or some kind of report or something like that, that they wind up giving you their email address in order to get that free thing that they want. Other ways to build an email list, advertising is really effective. Like Facebook has lead ads that are extremely effective if you can get get your ad dialed in where you're getting leads for relatively inexpensive. It's one of the best ways to grow a list because you can scale up a little faster than you can scale with content, because you can just increase your ad budget gradually and get more leads. So yeah, those are, I think, the main ways of growing a list. You kind of have to have, like, it kind of depends on your list and what you're offering to people. Like, why do they want to be on your list? And in my case, with a content-based website, the reason someone would want to be on the list, aside from the lead magnet, is getting that ongoing content. So as I publish new content to the site, I'm also emailing them. So, it aligns with their interest. Yeah. Mistakes. You asked something about like mistakes that people make. I think with email, one of the biggest mistakes is not really giving people a reason to subscribe. Like you can, like a lot of bloggers have an email list, and maybe they have like a sign up form or something, but there's no real reason for someone to subscribe. You're just kind of waiting for people to put their email address in. And today, if you think about how many email lists you're signed up to, most of us don't want to sign up for another email list unless there's some specific reason. And so we have to give people a reason, and we have to ensure that the emails are good. It delivers on what they want, so that when they see your email in their inbox, they're going to click to open it. Otherwise, they're just going to ignore it or eventually unsubscribe or something.
Yeah, there's a whole art to emails, and I kind of disrupt. I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves is actually over emailing, and so I kind of have to really clamp down on the marketing team and make them think about, hey, how much are we communicating? What are we communicating? What's the value of each one of those emails? And there's a whole industry there in email marketing, and so it takes a lot of energy to do it and do it well. And question, how much do you do around like A/B testing and really playing with the messaging that you're doing, or whether it's emails or your call to actions on the websites?
I personally don't do a ton of A/B testing, and that's not to say that it's not effective. I think it is. I'm just not the type of person, like, I don't really enjoy digging into analytics and um,
Which is rare. Most of
making
the web
really,
the
yeah,
web guru junkies are, right? It's all data driven.
yeah. I get bored with that kind of stuff. Like, I check my analytics quickly, but if I'm spending a ton of time making like a bunch of tweaks to just get like a small change, I get kind of bored with it. And like I said, it's not to say it's bad. I think it can be very effective. It's just not something I enjoy doing, and I'm not great at it. So I kind of don't do as much as I should, to be honest.
No, I think that's pretty good though. You got to know those things that you enjoy doing. And then you've got to, especially because you are a team of one, right? And so I would imagine it's not like you can go, hey, I love this and I don't like this, so I'm going to give this to someone else that is better at that, right? So for your time, probably for your best ROI, you've got to find those things that you enjoy doing and do them well, right? Is that kind of your mentality when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, yeah, that really is. Because if I don't enjoy it, I'd rather just go get a regular job. And so I don't really want to like work on something that I hate. And so I do try to focus on the things that I enjoy, like you said, and then try to do them well.
That's awesome. So Talk to me about like, how are you using any of the new tools? Are you using Chat GPT, AI? Like, what are there any tools that you're using that you found that have just really helped, accelerate what you're doing?
I do use ChatGPT. I also use Jasper, which is another AI writing tool. I've tried several others. Those are the two that I use currently. I mostly use it. I use it a lot for brainstorming. Like, for example, if I'm looking for article ideas for a blog, I'll give it a list of whatever ideas I have and say, create more ideas that are similar to this. I use it for outlining and organizing an article. I basically just tell it what I'm writing, what article I'm writing, what the target audience is, and ask it to generate an outline. And I rarely use it as is, but it definitely really helps for picking up on things that I might have overlooked. I also use it a lot of times for titles. I'm not very good with titles or headlines, and so I'll ask AI to help with creating a more catchy title. Because I struggle with it, and then it can give me a list of ideas really fast that I can choose from.
That's
Got it.
great. Are you doing any video at all on your content?
I don't currently do video. I have thought about it, but currently I'm not.
You can level up your TikTok dancing, right?
Yeah. So what are the different? It sounds like you're attracted to certain things. So what type of content? What are you really driving towards in your content?
It depends on the website. A lot of it is informational content. So I've had sites and web design, photography, personal finance, um, and so it's basic. I've historically focused on SEO content, right, for search traffic. So that's usually informational things like answering questions or comparison, like this product versus that product, or this company versus that company. With personal finance, it was a lot of lists. So things like different real estate investing apps that you could use, or different sites for side hustles for making money. So there's a lot of lists. But basically, like, I was focused mostly on things that people were searching for. Now I'm working on a a site that's travel photography related. So it's got like a photography aspect, but it's also got a travel aspect. And
Cool.
I'm going more after social media traffic, and so it's more. It's not so much in depth. It's more like visual and inspiration, and something that if someone's scrolling on Facebook, what's going to catch their attention that they're going to look at it. It's not. I'm not going for search traffic where it's like as long form content, where it's just strictly informational driven.
Got it. And what's been maybe just before we wind up, what's been kind of the most surprising niche that you kind of got into? And you're like, oh man, there's a lot of potential here.
I most of my stuff has been in like the bigger industries. I know a lot of people have always, people especially with content based websites, a lot of them have taken the
Riches in the niches.
yeah, and I have definitely started some sites on like some really specific niches, but I've always lost interest in them, and I don't really enjoy working on a site if it's something I have no interest in. So I've always kind of steered towards like the bigger things like design, photography, finance, travel, like big topics that are pretty broad, things that I happen to be interested in as well. Of my successful stuff, I really haven't had anything that was in a really surprising niche. I did have a site that did okay for a little while that was on it was like game room type products. It was like an Amazon affiliate site. So I had like reviews of dartboards and foosball tables and stuff that you would put in a game room. But I didn't put as much time into it because I got bored with it and it faded. And now it's still there, but it doesn't do anything.
So anything being right now. So you're like right now, your main thing is flip my site. Is that your main focus right now that you're working on?
Or is that the side hustle that we talked about?
Yeah. Which one is it?
That is more of a side hustle right now. So I'm kind of in a transition phase because I sold a few sites in the last year. And so I started Flip My Site, and I've done a good bit of client work over the last year. And I'm also working on the travel and photography site that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So those two are kind of both kind of side hustles right now, and client work has been more of my focus than my own sites in the last year.
So when you so for most of our listeners, if they wanted to go take a look at Flip My Site, tell us a little bit about the site. What's the key stuff here?
Sure. It's flipmysite.com. And basically, it's just a website about buying and selling online businesses, growing valuable online assets. Um, there are some articles on things like how to sell a website, how to buy a website, how to increase the value of your website, how to determine the value of your website. But I'd say more than half of the content on the site is success stories. So it's stories or interviews featuring people who have grown and sold, or in some cases bought an online business. I think they're really interesting. I know I enjoy them because I get to see and hear a lot of different people and see, what was unique about their story, how they grew the business, how they sold it, and how it's changed their life.
How are people buying websites right now? What are you seeing right now in our time?
Leverage buyouts, Casey, LBOs. Come on.
I know. But let's say, what are the multiples? What are the tell us kind of the highlights of what people are looking for right now when they buy a website.
People are buying websites. It's definitely slowed down from what it was a couple of years ago. I think the biggest thing I mentioned, the Google search traffic, that's huge for content-based websites. Other types of websites haven't been impacted as much, like e-commerce sites. SaaS businesses haven't been as impacted as content-based websites. So there's definitely still a good bit of interest. I think that the multiple really depends on a lot of factors. Obviously, Empire Flippers, one of the leading brokers of online businesses, shares some data on their website about multiples, and they update it every now and then. It has dropped a bit. I think I want to say it's around 30 months. If you were to take the average net profit for the past 12 months and then multiply that average monthly profit by about 30, I think is kind of a ballpark range right now. Obviously, some are going for higher, some are going for less. And it depends on the business model as well. SaaS businesses typically sell for a little bit more because they have that recurring revenue that everybody wants. There's definitely still a market. I think what's the sites that are really struggling to sell right now is the ones that were completely SEO dependent. No one really wants those for obvious reasons because their traffic is down pretty significantly in a lot of cases.
Awesome.
Very insightful.
Yeah. So that's flipmysite.com for those listeners. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to our rocket round.
Awesome. So first question here. So what do you like to do in your free time?
I enjoy hiking and photography. So that's kind of how I landscape photography is a hobby. And that kind of led me into hiking because I have to hike to get to a lot of places. So I enjoy doing that. I don't get to do it as much as I would like because I have 2 young kids. And so I'm pretty busy with family stuff. But yeah, that I would.
Travel's got to be one of those too, because you're doing the travel blog now. So
yeah. And I do like to, I like to travel to go see different places and take pictures.
So I just got back from Mount Rainier. And I made an attempt to the top of the summit. I did not get Feras's summit, but he did it at a much younger age. But man, talk about
next year with you, man.
Talk about the pictures that we got and the adventure. I mean, if I was a writer, I mean, it would just be so. If you like that kind of stuff, that's one of those trips I think you could write a ton of content about.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue to question number 2. What's been the most memorable moment in your business journey?
The most memorable moment has to be when I sold my site in 2013. That I sold it for 500,000 and I got 400,000 upfront. So, getting that amount of money in my bank account in one day was pretty big. I know, I've had other sales in the same ballpark since then, but that first one was, didn't set me up for retirement or anything, but I would define it as a life-changing moment. Like it definitely impacted things going forward.
It's exciting.
I totally know what you're talking about.
All right. And last question. So what is your favorite tool or resource that you like to use?
I like stuff that helps with organization and efficiency and making things easier. So I don't know if there's necessarily one tool in particular, but I'd say like Google Drive. I know it's pretty basic. Everybody uses cloud stuff, but that totally changed things for me, like being able to access files from a laptop and a desktop and while I'm traveling and, not have to worry about my hard drive dying and losing everything. So Google Drive, I use Asana for organizing tasks. I've been using Notion as well a little bit recently for organization. So I really like the organizational tools.
Awesome. Notion is a new one. I have not used that, but we used
Notion.
Sauna for, I don't even know, man, 15 years, 10 years. I remember since it first came out. Cool. Well, Marc, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. If listeners want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
The best way is through Flip My Site. There is a contact page on there. My email is Marc, MARC, @flipmysite.com.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great to have you here, Marc. That was great stuff.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.